We respond better when we just anticipate, like, there will be problems. I might be a nuclear engineer. I might be, a data analyst. I might be a customer service rep. I might be a CEO, but that's just their job title. Like, what their fundamental role is like, well, I'm here to solve problems. And so if a problem comes racing around the corner, I'm not bothered by it. I'm more like, okay, here it comes. Like, we've been expecting you. Come on in. I'm going to take this thing down.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'll begin by telling you about my friend Bill. He was a superb performer at the nuclear power plant where he worked. Bill was one of those guys who, regardless of the assignment, always added value beyond what his coworkers even imagined. He carefully listened to everyone, regardless of their role. He appreciated contrary viewpoints. He challenged the status quo. He frequently saw performance improvement opportunities that nobody else seemed to notice. And Bill did it all with no fancy title, no fancy degree, and none of the other bullet points you might expect to see on a LinkedIn profile. What Bill did have was a mindset that took him beyond what was merely needed to what was truly useful. While staying faithful to important safety regulations, he constantly scanned for ways to sidestep bureaucratic speed bumps. He quickly adapted to change. He was consistent. He was proactive and as reliable as tomorrow's sunrise. In short, wherever Bill was, good stuff always happened. Bill was what renowned researcher and executive advisor Liz Wiseman calls an impact player. Liz's views on human performance are not merely theoretical. They are based on years of up-close and personal study of workers in innovative organizations like Adobe, Google, Target, Salesforce, Apple, Disney, and Tesla. You likely associate Liz with her best-selling books, including Multiplier, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter, Rookie Smarts, Why Learning Beats Knowing in the New Game of Work, and Impact Players, How to Take the Lead, Play Bigger, and Multiply Your Impact. In addition to her research and consulting work, Liz writes for Harvard Business Review and Fortune, and she's a frequent guest lecturer at Stanford and her alma mater, Brigham Young University. She's consistently named one of the world's top leadership and management thinkers. I'm delighted to have Liz as my guest for this episode of Leadership. Liz, welcome.
Roger, it's good to be here. And I have to say, you have baited me into this conversation with your story about Bill.
Bill was awesome. Just let me say he was awesome.
I want to meet Bill, and he sounds amazing. And it's just like it's a poster for what we see in the most impactful people.
Well, and as you can imagine, at a nuclear power plant, you need people like that. You need them everywhere, but he was especially good in that environment. Well, I've been looking forward to our conversation. I love talking with really smart people, and you certainly qualify. First, I'd like to explore some of the ideas you offered in a speech I heard you deliver at BYU. After you got your master's degree in organizational behavior, you went to work for a company called Oracle. At that time, it was a new outfit that was on hardly anybody's radar. You said that in that first job out of graduate school, you observed different kinds of leaders. Some you came to call multipliers, and others you came to call diminishers. Tell us what you learned.
Well, my learning began when I found myself dropped into this sea of brilliant people. And it was probably a situation ripe for imposter syndrome for me to think like, I don't belong here. I'm around all these really, really brilliant people. But I had a very different reaction. I just was fascinated by all of the brilliant people I worked around. I think like you, Roger, I love to talk to really smart people, and I love to kind of soak a little of that in myself. It's maybe a little bit selfish. And I watched all of these brilliant people, and I watched what happened when they got put into leadership roles. It was this really fast growing company today. Oracle is this behemoth of an organization. And I noticed that some of these really smart people, like they were amazing as contributors, but when they got put into leadership roles, sometimes their intelligence was so dominant that everyone else had to be subordinate, that they were smart, but no one around them got to be smart. They were quick with answers. They were quick to argue, to disagree. And I noticed that people shut down around them. And in some cases, people cowered around them. Like, oh, I don't want to say anything. I'm going to get shot down. I'm just going to hold back. But other people held back, not because they were afraid of them per se, but because they didn't really have anything to add to the conversation. Like they felt unnecessary. The boss was doing the big thinking. The boss was solving the problems. All they had to do was sort of show up and nod their head and, bring a pad of paper and take notes, take orders. And I guess that's a reasonable way to work in an environment where the environment is simple and not changing, and the leader has all the answers and can see what's coming. But it's not a great way to lead in a chaotic environment, an environment where things are constantly changing, where, new technologies change landscapes, where you need everybody's insight and foresight and perspective on things. So I noticed these leaders that I ended up calling diminishers because they had this dampening, diminishing effect on others. But I also noticed leaders who were equally smart, and they had a very different effect on people around them. People were sharp around them. People were at their best. People leaned forward, paid attention, did their homework, came ready, were articulate and spoke up and spoke out around these leaders. And I ended up calling them, years later after I had done this research, I called these leaders multipliers because they had this amplifying effect on others. People contributed fully. We found that these diminishing leaders got less than half of people's available intelligence.
Oh,
less than half.
What a waste.
Exactly. And Roger, you and I both come to our work in leadership, and I come to my research having spent years in the corporate world, begging for a head count to do the job. And I thought, what an incredible waste of the company's resource, but also what a waste of the work experience, and a waste of human talent. And it was after I left Oracle and started doing executive coaching work that I saw this dynamic play out over and over. And I guess I started thinking maybe this was a tech industry phenomenon, but it turns out this dynamic plays out everywhere. And that's where I ended up doing the research, really trying to understand, why is it that some leaders amplify intelligence and others diminish it? And, I found that not only did these diminishing leaders get less than half of people's intelligence, I found that a lot of the diminishing is actually coming from really good people, well-intended people. It's not just the tyrannical, narcissist, know-it-all micromanager. A lot of it is coming from really well-meaning leaders.
Yes. Well, I've heard you tell a story about a multiplier who was more public than most, Magic Johnson, the basketball phenom. Tell us that story, if you would.
Well, I think he's an incredible leader. And maybe a turning point in his leadership journey came, I think, when he maybe, I guess, made the pivot from being an incredible athlete to an incredible leader. And, he was in high school. He wasn't yet commonly known as Magic Johnson. He was Irvin Johnson Jr., and he was a phenom. And his coach had said to him, and it was something that the coach said that really shaped him. His coach had said, Irvin, every time you get the ball, I want you to take the shot. Now, some people might have thought, well, his coach must have surely said, be a playmaker, pass, look for an opening, optimize the team. No, his coach directed him to take the shot. And so he did, and he scores a lot of points, and they win a lot of games. In fact, they really win all the games, and they're dominant with young Irvin taking these shots, but they would win with, I don't know, let's say 54 points, and he would have scored, at least high 30s, but often in the 40s, sometimes 50, 52 of these points. And, everyone loves it. They're winning. The other players love it. They're high school kids. Like, how exciting is that to be on an undefeated team?
I wonder about the parents of the other players, how they like that.
Yeah, well, that was the turning point, Roger. That's when, this young man, Irvin, happened to notice the faces of the parents. And, they might have enjoyed seeing kind of like, I don't know, an early version of Lakers Showtime Magic, back in the day. But, I don't know, after a game or two, that's going to wear off. And, of course, they came there to see their kid play. And he saw that. And I just have so much admiration for a high school student, a high school athlete who notices the disappointment on the faces of the parents and then makes this decision. And he said, I made a decision. There's a young man that I would use my God-given talent to help everyone on the team be a better player. Okay. So now we have like a phenomenal athlete sensitized to what it takes to be a phenomenal leader. What I love about this example is I've watched a lot of game film from his career, and it's not like he went forth and only passed. It's not like he was most inspirational, like cheering the team on. Like, he played huge. I mean, just think of like his rookie year up against the 76ers in that like final game to win the title, and where he's like, I'll be Kareem. And, he scores a phenomenal number of points in this game. But his orientation is not just to play big himself, but to play in a way that invites people around him to play big.
Yes, we need more of those. Let's go back to diminishers. You say some of them are accidental. How so?
Well, it's easy to understand how a power monger can have a diminishing effect on others. But I find that a lot of the diminishing comes not from the power monger, but the person who is almost like power naive, who doesn't understand the power that they actually hold and wield just being a leader of the team or just being the parent in the room. They're often people oblivious to their power. They don't understand that just an idea or a suggestion from them feels like a command to someone else, or leaders who are really big-hearted and helpful. And they're quick to jump in and help when people are struggling. I call this the rescuer accidental diminisher tendency. And they think they're helping, but of course, it's hurting because people aren't able to grow through the challenge of doing the hard work, like getting it across the finish line themselves. Like, they tend to carry other people, whereas they're building capability, but other people are getting weaker around them. Or the protective leader who decides that they'll do like the hard stuff. They'll have the hard conversations, deal with the difficult customers, the difficult people, the difficult situations. And they're protecting people from hardship, thinking, okay, I'm just clearing a path so other people can focus and do their work. But these leaders become like a banyan tree, and they provide comfort and shade, but nothing grows under the banyan tree. under these leaders. And, there's you know, almost a dozen ways that we see that people can diminish with the best of intentions. The idea found, the always on leader, the rescuer, the rapid responder, the protector, the pace setter, the strategist, the optimist, the perfectionist, the do-it-yourselfer, the overly hierarchical boss who just kind of owns a set of resources but underutilizes people they don't formally lead. So
Right.
we find that most of the diminishing is done with really actually pretty good intentions, which means to be multipliers, we have to be aware of how our best intentions can actually have a negative impact.
Yes. To be the best multiplier, you need to do it mindfully, I believe. Need to be aware, specifically aware of what you're doing. It's not just your style. You deliberately do it. Well, now, you say professionals sometimes let their knowledge get in the way, and you're an advocate of what you call rookie smarts. I love that term. Tell us what you mean by rookie smarts, and what does it look like in actual practice?
The kind of core idea in this book and this body of research is that knowledge can be a curse. That when we have a lot of expertise and knowledge, we are quick to assume. We pull a play out of our pocket, like, oh, I've seen this before. Here's what I'm going to do. And we don't really see how the environment is changing. We don't ask for feedback because we've got it figured out. We kind of make big bets rather than a lot of small bets. And it's this idea that knowledge and experience can actually be really limiting and dangerous in times of a lot of change. And that often we're at our very best when we know the very least, when we're new and when we're naive and when we're struggling up a steep learning curve. And it's not just a matter of beginner's mind. It's not just that we're open. It's not just that we bring fresh ideas. In many ways, the advantage of being a rookie is that we bring no ideas. That feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing. And when people are mindful about that, when they're aware that they're doing something important and hard for the first time, and they realize they can't just reach in their pocket and pull out a play. They can't just dispense a preconceived idea or answer. That's when we start to dig deep. We're like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Maybe I should ask someone who does. One of the things we found in this research is that, if you ask an expert, you tend to get an answer, one answer. And if you ask someone who's inexperienced but intelligent and mindful, you tend to get on average 5 experts' insights because they reach out and they're like, hey, buddy, do you know how to do this? I don't know how to do this. Or today, you often go out to YouTube or the internet, kind of okay, who's done this before? When we're new, we don't have a track record to rely on. So we put points on the board quick, trying to get something going. We ask for feedback. Not because it's just a healthy practice, but because we're desperate. Am I getting it right? And we're really open when people tell us no, that's not it. Okay. It puts us, it actually kind of in short, it puts us in the state most companies are trying to keep their workforce in: curious, humble, quick, agile, responsive.
Sure. We need to challenge our own assumptions. And I think it seems to me that's part of rookie smarts. You may be a very seasoned veteran, but if you're put in a role where you don't know the people and you honestly don't know the issues that well, you need to challenge your assumptions because, as you say, some people are pretty quick to assume that they've got it figured out when they really don't.
Yeah, and I think when we approach these new challenges well, we find that we're not only pretty good at them, we actually find it's a joyful place.
Yes.
We've each had careers in the corporate world. We've each written books. And, we've each have some years behind us. And how fun is it when you get a chance to do something you've never done before and you get that kind of youthful joy of learning something for the first time and getting good at something that you never thought that you would be good at. And it's a vibrant way of working.
Right. Well, I think back to the experience I had with one of the CEOs I worked with at Campbell Soup Company, and he was brilliant at this. He was a brilliant man. But he always challenged his assumptions, and he was ready to learn from anyone. I saw him one time sitting down with an intern, a summer intern, who was doing something with some product packaging. And the CEO, his name was Gordon McGovern, said, "Well, why don't you do it this way? I've seen it." And the young man said, "No, I'm doing it this way because." And Gordon said, "Terrific. You see it differently. Help me understand how you see it." That was his whole orientation. And he was a really, really strong leader. People would walk on hot coals for that man because he was ready to learn from anyone. And people learned that it's okay to ask what we might call naive questions.
Yeah.
I think that's probably part of rookie smarts. Speaking of questions, what role do you think the ability to ask good questions play in a person's ability to learn and to lead? To what extent do they need to be more mindful about the skill of asking good questions?
Well, in short, for leaders, the skill of asking good questions is everything. I'd put it in the top 3, like, master skills that you need as a leader. This ability not to dispense answers. And it's so hard because as a leader, people look up to you and they come to you wanting answers. And I think most of us, when something is hard and difficult, like, it's tempting to say, just, boss, tell me what to do.
Right.
It's easy. It's the stress response in us. But, the best leaders don't dispense the answers. They ask the questions that get other people thinking, and they ask the questions that focus the energy and intelligence of the group on the right problems. Like, a leader's job in asking questions is not just to get people thinking, it's to help people know what to think about and say, like, here's the problem that we're trying to solve. And, the image I always get of like what this looks like done well, particularly in times of crisis, high stakes, dangerous situations. I always think of that scene from the Apollo 13 movie where everything's gone wrong and they're no longer can, achieve a lunar landing. They're just trying to get these astronauts back to Earth alive. And, it's such a tense point. And it's that scene where they realize that the carbon dioxide is building up in that LIM module that they're not supposed to be in, that wasn't designed, for the astronauts for that period of time. And it's building up with poisonous gas. And it's that scene where the engineering manager pulls this group of engineers together. He says, hey, the guys upstairs have handed us this one, and we've got we've got to find out how to make this fit into the hole for that using nothing but this. Like, we have to figure out how to filter this gas. And what I love about this scene is that the engineering manager doesn't offer a solution. He doesn't offer even a suggestion. He's had advance notice of this problem. Like, he's known about this for, 5-10 minutes longer than they have. And he doesn't start solving the problem. He defines the problem. And, I was told by a CEO of a tech company, he says, I've learned, like, engineers are brilliant and you never give an engineer a solution. You always give an engineer a problem and then you let them find a solution. And so he's like, how do we make this fit into the hole for that using nothing but this? And he tells them, here are the resources that you're working with.
Yeah, he dumped them on the table, if I recall, in the movie.
On the table.
Right.
And what I love about this, and he does a couple things so well. He's like, hey, the guys upstairs have handed us this one, meaning this is our moment. He also says, like, I get it. We didn't create this problem. Nobody's blaming you, but this is our opportunity to save lives, to save a mission, to save NASA's reputation. Like, it's kind of coming down to us in this moment. And then he puts these resources out, which is like giving them like the tools they need to solve it, but it's also giving them the boundaries like, hey, don't waste a minute of our time belly aching about how you wish we had duct tape, and like how you were the one who said, we should put a roll of duct tape up, in the capsule in case something goes wrong. Like, hey, everyone, did you remember how that was my idea that we should put, like he just shortcuts all of the belly aching about what we wish we had.
Right.
And just says, this is what we're working with. This is the problem to solve. And then he just says, go. And I think it's emblematic of how important it is for leaders to ask the questions, not answer them. And to really have kind of mastered the skill of what's a question that tends to shut people down. And what's a question that gets people talking and thinking and collaborating and innovating and rethinking and questioning and taking ownership, and all the things that leaders want from people can come out of a really good question.
Yes, certainly.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
I've heard you say that two equally capable people may be set apart by mindset and behaviors. One remains a valued contributor, while the other becomes a top-performing impact player. Tell us more about that differentiation, if you would.
Well, maybe I can tell you how I started the research. I had been, for a decade, out teaching leaders how to be multipliers, how to be leaders who bring out the best in others, leaders around people, make a full contribution, make a big impact. And I was teaching this workshop, and one of the engineering managers, he kind of like blurted out, maybe raised his hand, but he jumped into the conversation and said, yeah, I get it. I want to be a multiplier leader, but you can't multiply zero. Ooh, like them are fighting words around me.
Yeah.
See, Roger, you would have done the same thing too. It would have like raised the hair on the back of your neck or whatever.
Right.
So I'm about to give him a lecture on like, yeah, okay, not everyone's a genius, but everyone has genius and talent, and the job as a leader is to see it and use it. And I realized that's not what he's talking about at all. Like when I just listened to him, I realized what he's saying is, like, as a leader, I need to bring the right mindsets and practices to help people contribute fully and make an impact. But so do the people on the team. Like, they've got to show up with the right mindsets and practices as well. And, that's what really got me thinking, yes, leadership is a variable in this equation of how do you create an environment where people can do great work. But the way the talent shows up, the way the players show up on the team matters a lot as well. And so I went and spent a couple years studying different types of contributors in organizations. And in our pool, we did the interviews in 9 companies, as you mentioned earlier, all top employers. We interviewed 170 managers, and we asked them to identify 3 different kinds of people that they had led, all of whom were smart, all of whom were capable, all of whom were hardworking, but one of whom was making a solid contribution, one of whom was making an extraordinarily valuable contribution. Those were the impact players. And then also one who was under contributing. I did write about this a lot in the book. I chose to focus really on the difference between a solid contributor and an impact player. But I was also fascinated by smart, hardworking, talented people who were like woefully under contributing relative to their capability. And for the most
Hmm.
part, these were people who were just pointed in the wrong direction. Like they were working hard backwards. People who were like pursuing their own agenda, people who like kind of had their thing. In short, these were people who were like scoring an own goal. Like
Right, right,
we've all watched the little pee-wee soccer game where a little kid gets a ball and like she races down the field and like delightfully scores a goal into the opponent's like goal box.
right.
Yeah, and we see that play out in the workplace in these under contributors, but really what we found was not, it wasn't about how hard people were working, it was about what they were working on and the way that they worked on it. And when we looked at this difference, it was really a difference in how they dealt with the messy problems, where to really deliver value and have an impact, you can't just stand comfortably in the box of your job description. I guess maybe to take this soccer metaphor a little bit further, it was we found that the ordinary contributors were almost like players on a foosball table. The little
Yes,
plastic players that are all arrayed onto these rods. And
right,
like they can move a little bit, but not a whole lot. And I hate playing foosball. Honestly, it's so frustrating to me because I'm like, that player can't reach the ball.
right,
And I think a lot of people approach work this way, which is this is my job. This is what I do. This is my position. This is my line. I don't go above it. I don't go below it. I just like stand here. And like if a ball comes right at me, I'll kick it. Whereas the impact players are far more fluid and mobile. It's not like little kitty bunch ball where everyone's running, but people who have a lot of impact are like Bill, who don't worry about hierarchy in the organization. Like they talk to everyone. They're willing to step like beyond the bounds of their job to go do the job that's needed.
right. They don't wait for the ball to come to them. They not only go to the ball, they go to where the ball is going to be. They anticipate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just going to say, like, when others are waiting for direction or waiting for role clarification, waiting to be told they're the leader, the impact players are like, okay, we have a situation where someone needs to take charge here. I will do that. And they do it as an act of service. And, in some ways, you could look at these impact players as sort of aggressive. And it's not what we found. The data doesn't bear that out at all. In fact, across the 170 people that were the impact players in this study, not a single one of them was, according to their managers, a prima donna, like a ball hog, like a diva, a bully. They were people who were working courageously, assertively, but all in the service of the team and what was important to the organization. So people weren't like, gee, you've got sharp elbows. It was more like, hey, I'm going to pass the ball to you because I know you're going to get it across the finish line.
Right. To use your terminology, these impact players wore opportunity goggles. I love that term.
Yeah. We found that they were willing to step into the fray of
Right.
uncertainty and ambiguity. And Roger, you've done a lot of work around change and change readiness and how to lead people through change. Like they were willing to step into the fray. And it wasn't necessarily because they were braver than anyone else. It was that they could find opportunity in that, where, in the messy problems and the unforeseen obstacles and the moving targets and all the everyday challenges of modern work life, instead of just seeing them as a threat or an annoyance, they're like, okay, this didn't go right. We're in a bit of a mess here. How is this an opportunity to demonstrate leadership or to add value, to distinguish ourselves, to rethink a problem? Like, okay, no one expected this, but like this actually gives us a chance to do it the way we always wished we could do it.
Right. I'm curious about this. Most organizations have what we might call unwritten rules. How do impact players tend to respond to unwritten rules?
This is maybe where we talked about opportunity goggles, and I guess I haven't thought of it this way, but it's maybe more like having a bit of X-ray vision.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, to deliver value, you have to understand what's valued. And what's valued, it may be written down of like, here's our corporate values, but it's working in an organization kind of eyes up. Okay, I'm going to keep going on the soccer metaphor. This, like, don't let this any further. Is making me think of something one of my buddies said to me. He coaches youth soccer and has for years. And he said, I've noticed the best players, they don't look at their feet while they're playing. They're glance down at their feet and of course the ball, and they're making contact and they're dribbling, but they're playing with their eyes up, looking out at the field, seeing what's happening, looking at the movement, looking at who's open. And I think this is how we see the organizations when we're impact players, is like, okay, here's me and here's what I'm doing, but I'm going to put my eyes up and I'm going to look at what's important here, what's happening over there. And the unwritten rules to figure out like what's important, what's valued, that's rarely written down and handed to us. Mostly we have to ferret that out. Like, okay, what's going on here? What are people paying attention to? What are people angry about? What are people excited about? What gets talked about in like our quarterly earnings announcement? What is my boss like constantly fretting about? And that's helping us to see what's important. And that's what I mean when they're paying attention to the unwritten rules of engagement.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about mentoring. How can an impact player multiply, or how can the impact players multiply their influence through mentoring, or at least providing a good example for other team members?
This is probably a little bit like sourdough baking. And now I can't speak from any skill or experience here. I killed my sourdough starter. Roger, are you a sourdough baker?
No, but our granddaughter makes delicious sourdough bread. And she lives very close, and she hand delivers.
You are a consumer.
I'm a consumer. I'm a great appreciator of good sourdough bread.
I'm sure
yes.
Your daughter has explained kind of how the sourdough starter works, and you kind of have to feed the sourdough and give it like air and space and flour, and that starter kind of like replicates. And I think it's similar with, when you have impact players on your team, it's behavior you want to replicate. I haven't really run into a manager who, when they kind of hear about this idea of impact players, doesn't read the book or respond with, how do I get a whole team of people like this? How do I get a whole team of Bills? And it's about like understanding, like, how do you create an environment first where this way of thinking and working thrives and survives? And then how do you replicate it? Like, contact is part of it, which is one of the challenges in the remote working world, is people aren't rubbing up with shoulders. They're not seeing like, oh, that Bill guy, like, I'm watching him and I'm seeing how he's worked and I see how people respond to him and why everyone wants to like do. I bet everyone wanted to do everything Bill asked them to do.
Right. You use the term upward empathy. Tell us what that means and how does it apply to an impact player?
Oh, goodness. It's one of the things that we see, just like an abundance of upward empathy. And this was a little surprising for me because, having spent so many years looking at what good leadership looks like, I was like, yeah, leaders need to have empathy for their team, like really understand what it looks like from their team's perspective. Like the CEO of Campbell's that you talked about, like, oh, tell me, packaging designer, like what you see and what this looks like. But what we found is that the impact players have upward empathy, meaning they look up in the organization and they may see it, but they don't dwell on like, gee, my boss doesn't know what he's doing. She doesn't get it. like they don't understand our reality, they look upward and think, well, that's a hard job. I wonder, like, what is difficult for them? Like, I wonder how I might make their work a little bit easier. And they might even have empathy. Let's say when they're being micromanaged, and I hate being micromanaged. I don't know about you.
I'm sure you do. Most of us hate it.
Oh, I get feisty. Like
Mhm.
like my claws come out.
Good for you.
Yeah, no, I get really, it really bothers me. And so when someone's micromanaging you, it's easy to say like, well, you're an idiot. You don't know. You don't trust. And instead, it would be like, okay, my boss is micromanaging. Why are they micromanaging? Is somebody micromanaging them? What pressure are they under? I wonder what they need from me for them to feel more comfortable giving me space. Like, what would I need to do to earn their trust? And it's understanding, like, it's perspective taking, and it's just perspective taking upward. In some ways, it's leading our leaders, which feels unfair because we think, well, no, it's like my leader should be leading me. Like that's why they're the boss. That's what they're getting paid to do. But I think sometimes when we don't have really good leaders, it's not just our burden to be the better leader, but it's our opportunity to demonstrate that leadership upward. It's how we deal with diminishers,
Yes.
how we create space for ourselves to have bigger impact.